The teller popping in for UFC Moscow. This card is stacked. And I'm not just saying that just to say it, because I know I've been saying it very often as of recently. But it's just the case. I mean, if you guys haven't really done your homework on this card and looked at who we got to look forward to fighting this Saturday morning, I'm telling you, there's some top prospects battling it out head-to-head in a couple different spots, a lot of entertaining fighters, and of course you got the main event and the co-main event spot, which are two very entertaining fights. So looking forward to breaking down these fights here in a second. And sorry for the delay in getting this video out. The teller has been doing a little bit of traveling, so it did hinder me getting this video out to you guys, earlier in the week around Monday, Tuesday, like I like to do. But nevertheless, let's take a look back at this past weekend's card. We got to do that. Was not the best of cards for me. I'll cut to the chase, man. Gregory really dropped the ball. That was a fighter that I was on. You guys heard me here last weekend, and that was one of my main plays, and he really dropped the ball. If you run the tape back, you heard what I preached about. I said this guy has amazing wrestling, some of the best wrestling I've seen in the octagon. We never even got to see him use his wrestling even for a split second in that fight. We never even got to see him attempt a takedown, and never even, he didn't get stuffed or anything, which was even more disappointing. But that is the fight game, and I guess he thought he was going to show his boxing skills that he felt that he improved as of recently, and try to intimidate Kevin Lee, which I think was a horrible game plan. And obviously Kevin Lee ended up using his hands to set up that nasty head kick and just put him completely out unconscious. So that was disastrous. That was a bad play. Other than that, I did have Edmund Shabazian. Wasn't as big of a play as the Gregor Gillespie, but in retrospect, I kind of wish I would have went bigger on that fight. Edmund Shabazian, this guy has shown time and time again that this guy is a true stud and has a world of potential. So we'll keep tabs on him moving forward as well. Of course, the main event was a little disappointing. I wanted to see that thing go 5 rounds. Although Jorge Masvidal, he was doing his thing. You can't take anything away from him, man. He was really, just dropping Nate Diaz, piecing him up. He was just stronger in there. And I really would have liked to seen that fight hit the 4th and 5th rounds. I'm not necessarily saying that Diaz would have won it in one of those rounds, but you never know. Diaz is known for his cardio. That's what he does. I mean, the guy is a triathlon type of fighter, and I think he really would have been digging deep in those 4th and 5th rounds. As he says as well, he said that he was really pacing himself and was going to turn it on in the 4th and 5th. I wouldn't necessarily, and I'm not one of those guys that's, usually, likes to believe all these fighters bullshit half the time when they say shit like that after they lose. But, looking back at Nate Diaz's career, I tend to believe him. I really do. Sometimes he's a little bit of a slow starter, and you'll see him really turn it on in those late rounds. We've seen it in the McGregor fights, and I think he was going to come out there in the 4th round and really try to turn it on. I don't necessarily think it was going to be enough, though. I mean, that was Masvidal's fight, so props to him. The card wasn't the best for the teller over here, but you know how it is, man. It's the fight game. It's a very unpredictable, crazy game. How about the Johnny Walker fight against Corey Anderson? Corey Anderson knocks Johnny Walker out. I mean, this fight game's crazy, man. Throughout that whole card, man, there was some wild fights and things. It was a very unpredictable card. We learn from it. We move on to the next. And now we got UFC Moscow. In the first fight of the early morning, we got Gregory Popov taking on Davey Grant. We just saw Popov fight not too long ago. The guy is shown to be a very tough fighter. In that fight against Eddie Wineland, he did eventually get finished, but I mean, he really, he hung in there for a while because he was taking some brutal shots in the beginning of that fight, and he just continued to hang in there. He gave some of it back to Eddie Wineland as well, and he definitely showed signs of having some good skills in there. And now he's stepping in there against a guy in Davey Grant who is not on the level of Eddie Wineland, in my opinion. I'm not the biggest fan of Davey Grant. I don't think he really even deserves to be in the UFC, to be quite honest with you. I mean, this is a guy that lost to Damian Stasiak, who, in my opinion, is a very, very below average type of fighter that ever entered the UFC. So, Manny Bermudez just absolutely outclassed him, dropped him, and ended up getting the submission on him. And, if I'm going to pick somebody here, I'm going with Popov. Like I said, in his last fight, even though he lost, he did show some solid signs of being a well-rounded fighter. He has some good striking. He's tough. He's solid. And I'll take Popov to win that fight. Transitioning to the next fight, we got some bantamweight girls throwing down here. We got Jessica Rose Clark taking on Pani Keonzad. For those of you guys that are familiar with Pani, She was on one of the Ultimate Fighter shows not too long ago. Not a bad looking chick, you know. She's fighting out of Sweden. I think she has a Middle Eastern background, looks like. And, then she's, Jessica Rose Clark. It's funny, Jessica Rose Clark is a girl, one of the more recent girls to take out Paige Van Zandt. That was a play that I gave out to you guys when I first started my this MMA fortune teller shit, when I first started on Instagram and whatnot. And a lot of you guys were shocked that I was going against Paige Van Zandt. I saw true value in this girl against her, but obviously I'm not the biggest fan of Paige Van Zandt. Her looks definitely overvalue the odds that she was getting there for a while. But Jessica Rose Clark, this is a girl, she's a well-rounded fighter. She goes to split decision very often. Her fights are always going to play out closely. This is a girl I would never want to touch. Has a heavy favorite in any fight. If you can get her at underdog value or a pick'em, sometimes it's worth it. And that's basically the case here. This fight's a pick'em. But Pani, she's been looking decent as of recently. She's definitely working on her striking. She might be a little bit more athletic in there. This is a very hard fight to call. If you look at the girls that took out Pani as of recently, for the most part, they're pretty crafty girls. The Tanya Evinger, Sarah Kaufman, Macy Chiasson, pretty tough chick there. And other than that, she goes out there, she takes out those no-name type of girls. This is going to be a very close fight. I'm going to take Jessica Rose Clark to pull off a split decision victory. This fight can go any way, and I'm not touching this fight. As we take a look to the next fight, you see a picture of the teller over here, Roosevelt Roberts. This is a cool dude. I met him not too long ago at the event that took place down over here in South Florida. And cool dude. This guy's shown a world of potential, Roosevelt Roberts. However, he is coming off his first loss against Vince Pichel. That was a tough fight for him. Before that, he's just really been handling everybody in there. Undefeated, even almost as an amateur. He only lost one amateur fight. The guy has shown some true skills. And this is going to be a tough test for him now. Once again, he's going over there to Russia, over there to Moscow, and he's taking on a real Russian fighter in Alexander Yakovlev. Alexander Yakovlev, this is a guy that's been locked in there with some really good fighters. He's taken out a lot of OGs in the game. He took out Paul Daly, a while back, in 2013, and that was one of the first times you've seen a guy go in there with Paul Daly and kind of, use his craftiness to pull off a decision. Paul Daly really wasn't losing to a lot of fighters back then. He was taking guys out left and right. So, he was only losing to big-time names. So that kind of put Yakovlev on the map. But he's a type of fighter, man. He's just a guy that's going to, try to hang in there. He's not going to be knocked out easily. He'll try to strike with you a little bit. He'll work some takedowns. He has good cardio. And you saw that in his last fight. Against that top prospect, Alex Da Silva, who's shown to have some promise. Alex Da Silva dropped him early, started to put some work on Yakovlev, but Yakovlev just hung in there and then eventually, ended up pulling off the decision I'm sorry, he ended up getting a guillotine choke. That's right, he finished him. Ended up finishing him in the second round. So, Yakovlev is a crafty guy. And Roosevelt Roberts, I hope he went back to the drawing board and really worked on his game and worked on his cardio in the later rounds too, because I feel like he does fade a little bit in those later rounds. You saw it in the Thomas Gifford fight. I was live for that fight. In the third round, Thomas Gifford was getting on top of him. That wasn't a good look for Roosevelt Roberts, because Roosevelt has good wrestling, good striking. There was no reason for him to ever be on his back against a guy like Thomas Gifford. It really seemed like he just took that round off, but wasn't a good look. This is a very close fight. I'm going to go with Roosevelt to take the fight. I think he'll be a little bit more athletic and can be the better striker in there, and he can hold his own as far as wrestling goes. But if he starts to fade, or if he makes some rookie mistakes in there, I won't be surprised in the least bit if Yakovlev pulls this fight off and wins a decision, or even ends up getting a nasty submission. The guy, like I said, is a very crafty fighter, so he's a plus 140. There might be some possible value on him as an underdog. But yeah, I'm going to take Roosevelt to win the fight. Just straight up, I think Roosevelt handles business. At least I'm pulling for him. Hopefully he does. Abu Bakar Nurmagomedov taking on David Zawada. This is actually a good fight here too. I know the line is pretty steep. A lot of people are on Abu Bakar. He runs with Khabib and all of them over there, AKA the Dagestani AKA team. This guy definitely has some true skills. This guy's a solid wrestler, solid striker, just like the majority of all of those guys over there. These guys, they don't mess around with their training. These guys take this game very serious. And you see it time and time again when they step in the UFC. They're usually pulling off victories. And I think that's part of the reason why the line's so steep. As far as David Zawada goes, this guy, he's a skilled fighter. I was quite impressed with him in the Danny Roberts fight. I think he could have easily won that fight. It was a split decision loss for him, and he looked really good in that fight. I believe he might have even taken that fight on short notice. And, he looked good in that fight, man. He was bullying Danny Roberts around. He did let Roberts hang around a little bit too long, and Roberts, he ended up getting a little bit back in that fight, was able to make it look close enough where he was able to pull off the split decision. But the point I'm getting at is this guy Zawada, I mean, he looked tough in that fight. He is coming off a loss to Jinglang Li, which wasn't the best of look for him. But just don't get it twisted. Don't think that this guy David Zawada is stepping in the cage over here and he's incompetent and is not going to be able to hold his own. Of course, I got Abu Bakar winning this fight. The guy is showing a little bit more on tape. The guy seems to be a little bit more of a skilled fighter. Of course, I get why he's a 3-1 favorite. But I don't think I would be touching him as far as parlaying him or anything, because David Zawada can definitely show up and make this a very close fight. Don't be surprised if he does that, and don't be shocked if he even pulls off the victory. Of course, as I said, I'm taking Abu Bakar, but Zawada, stay tuned, watch that fight. You guys will see what I'm talking about. That guy, he could throw down. He could throw. He has power in his hands. He could grapple. He's a tough dude. Roman Kopylov taking on Carl Robertson. This is one of those fights I was telling you guys about earlier. Two guys that are very solid fighters that are working their way up in the game. Both of them creeping up to the prime of their careers. Carl Robertson is a guy, he's a tough fighter, man. This guy, you look at his 2 losses as of recently. I mean, he lost to Glover Teixeira, who's a true veteran of the game, who was a lot bigger than him. And then he did lose to Cesar Ferreira. He got tapped out by him, but Cesar has some solid jiu-jitsu. But Robertson's a guy, he's went in there, he's taken out guys like Ryan Spahn, Darren Stewart, Jack Marshman. He's beat very capable opponents. Carl Robertson has some good boxing, very good boxing, actually. Solid boxing. I would say that's the strength of his game. But now he's stepping in there, with an undefeated 8-0 prospect that's very big for the weight class as well. 6'2", has a very big frame for the middleweight weight class. And a guy that's really just been going in there and taking everybody that he's been fighting out for the most part. This guy, I liked what I've seen from him on tape. The guy is very, very capable. This guy's a solid fighter. And he might actually start to shake up the middleweight division. He has the potential to do so. I think he's going to come in here. I think he's going to take Carl Robertson out. I'm not necessarily sure if he's going to get the finish because Robertson is a tough dude, but I think he's going to pull the victory off. I think he's going to get the W here. It's a close fight, but I just like what I've seen from this guy. The fight's taking place over in Russia. He should have the crowd behind him. Even if the fight plays out a little bit closer than maybe I see it playing out, even then, he should pull off the decision victory. So, man, we'll keep an eye on this guy. But I wouldn't be shocked, if Carl Robertson shows up. Like I said, the guy's very good boxing. If he can keep this fight on the feet and maybe use his boxing to pull off a victory here. But I'm going to take the Russian Roman Kopylov to pull this fight off. In this next fight, we got a guy that a lot of people might be sleeping on here. Not too long ago, this guy was on average in every fight that he entered around a -5 to 700. This guy, he has some great sambo wrestling, and that is Rustem Kopylov. And he will be taking on Sergei Konduzoko, a.k.a. Honda. A guy that, I'm not super high on, to be quite honest with you guys. So, let's get into this fight. Rustem Kopylov, like I said, this guy, he's coming off a tough loss against a very solid fighter in Diego Ferreira. Diego Ferreira, he's a whole different type of fighter than Sergei Honda, in my opinion. So let's not look too much into that loss. Ferreira is a perennial underrated type of fighter. He's not all jacked up and whatnot, but the guy has striking jiu-jitsu, and he's taking guys out left and right. And then the Cajun Johnson, the victory that Kopylov had in that fight was a split decision victory, and that's kind of what set the tone for people starting to, drop their stock in Rustem. But, I'm going to take him to win this fight here. I mean, this is a guy that time and time again has went in there, uses wrestling to dominate fighters. He does have a little bit of issues with his cardio. That is one thing you have to be careful for if you're betting him, because Sergei is going to be hanging around all the way to the last second of this fight. And Sergei has been in some really tough fights as of recently, and has pulled those fights off really by just hanging in there, to the last second. That Rustim Akman fight, that was a very close fight, back and forth, and Honda really he dug deep in that fight and pulled that off. So, but like I said, I'm not really too impressed with Honda. As far as the striking goes, I mean, he hangs in there, but it's not the strongest, it's not the most crisp striking. He's one of those average type of fighters that just has good cardio, and he's very professional in there. So I'll take Rustam to win this fight. I just think that he has some true skills. I think that he has some more superior skills and can possibly take Sergei for a ride, slam him on his head a couple times in there, and we'll see if his cardio holds up and he seals the decision win off. And if he gets a finish, I'd be quite impressed with that. I think a finish would do him good. He really needs to get his stock to rise once again, maybe a nice slam to some punches like he's done before. So Khabibulov to win that fight. This fight right here, I referred to this into the intro of this video. I mean, this is one of the fights that I was really talking about. That's just going to be absolute fireworks. Two Rams just smashing each other's heads, man, running full speed into each other. Two young Rams that are just trying to make a name for themselves in the UFC, in the mixed martial arts game. Magomed Ankalaev taking on Dalsha Langiambula, the African fighter, who looked quite impressive in his last bout. And, Magomed has looked quite impressive to me as of recently, too. So, I made some money on him the last year or two over here. Magomed, he did have that one setback against Paul Craig. Again, that was a fight that he was absolutely dominating, and he got subbed in literally the last second of the last round in that fight. If it wasn't for that setback, this guy is as perfect as a professional fighter. He should be 11-0, but he just took out Klidson Abreu too. Klidson Abreu, this is a guy we're going to be talking about a little bit later. He's a solid fighter as well. That was a nice victory for him. And then everyone else, man, like I said, just taking these guys out. Marcin Prachnio, Wagner Prado. He's taking these guys out, and he's a solid grappler. He has power in his hands. His boxing's looking better every time you see the guy in there. And then you got this African beast who's just what can you say about this guy? You saw him in his last fight against Daquan Townsend, another athletic beast in there, and he showed to be the more superior specimen in there, man. He really just put it on him, ended up getting that finish in the third round as well. So this is a tough fight, man. I'll tell you what. I'm going to edge Ankalaev to win this fight, and I'll tell you why. I just think that he's going to be a little bit more polished up. I think his wrestling, his Sambo wrestling is going to be better. You take a look at the line, he's a minus 400 right now. Wow. I'm pretty shocked in that line. You see minus 300 here. It kind of started around. There's been a lot of money that's came in on Ankalaev, and I get it because the guy he shows up, he handles business, and the guy is a very skilled fighter. But this guy Dalcha, he's a beast, and if he connects, he's going to put anybody out. So, definitely the value's on the dog, in my opinion. If you want to roll the dice and you want to parlay a guy like Magomed, I'm not going to kill you for it because, I guess, yeah, he should go out there. Like I said, he should handle business. He should be the more professional, polished fighter. But when you're getting locked in a cage with the guy like the champion, that's what he likes to go by, the champion. He already, in his mind, he's already the champion. So this guy, he's a nasty, dangerous fighter. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this fight takes place. And like I said, I'm going to edge Magomed to win this fight just on his professionalism and being a more skilled fighter that's been training from a way earlier age than a guy like Dalcha. Shamil Gamzotov taking on Klidson Abreu. This is another solid fight of two guys that have a world of potential. I'm telling you, guys like this can really make a name for themselves with a big win here. And you can see these guys fighting some big fights, moving forward. I spoke about Klidson Abreu a little bit earlier. This is a guy, I'm telling you, he's a skilled fighter. His jiu-jitsu's on point. His striking's good. I like his boxing. I believe he's a southpaw fighter. I like the way he uses his hands. He gives guys some trouble. And I always got love for a guy that steps in there and handles business for me when I got money on him. And that's what he did against Sam Alvey not too long ago. So, I do got love for Klidson Abreu. He really went in there and just put a clinic on Sam Alvey. But this is a guy, that's taking out guys like Viktor Nemkov, who's a solid fighter, a solid Russian fighter. If you guys aren't familiar with him, I'm telling you, that guy, he's solid. He's been around the block. But this is a different type of opponent. There's no question about that. This guy, Shamil, has just, 13-0. This guy, he steps in there. Every guy he steps in there with, he takes them out. He's been tearing it up on the PFL scene in his last 2 fights. He's been on the ACB scene. This guy, he's had big fights, and in all those fights, man, he's really, he showed up. So, if I seen a little bit of a red flag on his resume, I didn't like the way he looked in the Rodney Wallace fight. He did pull off a split decision victory in that fight. Rodney Wallace was a guy that was in the UFC over probably like a decade ago. And he's still hanging around fighting, but that wasn't really a good look. Eddie Gordon was a guy that's kind of a washed up UFC fighter too, but he went in there and he handled business in that fight. I think this fight's going to play out close. I got Shamil to win the fight. I'll tell you guys right now, he's a 2-1 favorite. I kind of understand it to an extent because this guy's just, he's looked good on tape and he's really just, every time he goes in there, he handles business. But you can't sleep on a guy like Klidson Abreu. This is a guy, there's no easy victory when you step in the cage against a guy like Klidson. So, if you got 2-1 odds on that, I don't know how comfortable I would feel with that. I think I'd be a little stressed out once that bell rings and the fight starts. And, Klidson Abreu, he likes to go by the name the Russian Terror. So, that kind of speaks volumes because he stepped in there quite a few times and taken out these big Russian fighters. He's fought in the Russian scene before, and this will be nothing new to him as well. So take that into consideration. I think the value is on Klidson Abreu. And as far as picking a fighter here, I'm telling you, I'm not really that. I'm going to go with Shamil, I guess, if I had a gun in my head. You guys are saying, oh, my life's on the line. Who am I going to pick? I'm going to go with Shamil. This fight should be more almost about a pick 'em. I'm telling you guys right now. Klidson Abreu, he's going to show up. So as far as betting goes, the value's on Klidson Abreu. Taking a look at this welterweight matchup, we got Anthony Rocco Martin, a.k.a. Tony Martin. For whatever reason, this guy changed up his name not too long ago. I still know him as Tony Martin. That's what I think of him when I see him fighting. And he's taking on Ramazan Ameev, who was, he's made a little bit of a name for himself. This guy is he's a polished fighter. He steps in there and he pulls off victories time and time again. You really can't hate on the guy. He likes to go to decision very often. He's not the type of guy that's really going in there putting these guys out. But like I said, he continues to win. Tony Martin's coming off a tough loss against Damian Maia. That was a fight that he really dropped the ball, in my opinion. That was a fight that was his. He just had to stuff those takedowns and just, work his stand-up game. He ended up winning one of the rounds. Actually, he dominated the 3rd round once Damian Maia gassed out. But those first 2 rounds, he got taken down and controlled and he couldn't do nothing. Good submission defense, by not getting submitted by Damian Maia, the best grappler to ever bless the UFC, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, he dropped the ball. That was a fight that he definitely should have won, in my opinion. And before that, taking out a lot of good fighters, man. Sergio Moraes, Jake Matthews, Ryan LaFleur, Keita Nakamura. He's beaten solid fighters, man. Johnny Case, Alex White. That's really the Tony Martin that I know back in the day, taking out guys like Johnny Case, Alex White. Those guys were top prospects at the time. And, he came out victorious as the real prospect. And then ended up getting, big name fights like the Damian Maia fight. Now he needs to get back in the win column, and it's not an easy fight here. Ramazan Ameev, this is a guy that doesn't lose fights, so Tony Martin's coming in as the slight underdog here, and I could see why. I think this fight, in my opinion, can go either way, but a term that I like to use a lot, if I have a gun to my head right now, my life's on the line, I'm taking Ramazan Ameev. This guy, he hasn't dropped the ball as of recently. This guy's professional. He comes in, he knows what it takes to get the W inside the octagon. Fights taking place, over in Russia, a little bit closer to his hometown and whatnot. And I think that Ameev's probably going to show up, I think, and win this fight. But I think the fight's going to play out very closely, and we'll see how it goes. But I'll take Ameev. Look at Ed Herman. Short fuse Ed Herman still hanging around, fighting up here at the light heavyweight division. Win or lose, this guy's, he's made a name for himself throughout the years, and he's still getting main card slot fight. So he's taking on Kadis Ibragimov, a guy that, he's 8-1. Just took his first professional loss not too long ago. He did not look good in that fight. That was against the Korean fighter Da-Un Jung. He was a hefty favorite in that fight, and he really dropped the ball. I'm sure he cost a lot of people money there. So I really wasn't that impressed with him, and I wasn't impressed with him from what I've seen from him before that fight. You could run the tape back, and you could see how I broke that fight down. I think this guy was a little hyped up. He's coming in here now almost a 2-1 favorite against a guy, as I spoke of a couple seconds here ago about Ed Herman. This is a guy who used to be a very solid middleweight fighter. He doesn't like doing that weight cut anymore, and he's just a tough-nosed guy. I believe he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, a guy that's been around forever, and a crafty fighter. Has power in his hands, has a solid chin. This isn't a guy that's getting finished too often. He likes to come in and scrap. That's what he's doing now. He's just coming in. He takes the paycheck. They give it to him, and he has some fun in there. He scraps it up. And this is a fight I could see playing out closely. So I think I would have to say the values on Ed Herman. Kadis, I haven't really seen anything from him that, in my opinion, warrants to be a 2-1 favorite. The guy, he's not that physically imposing. His striking is nothing that impressive. His grappling was nothing of that impressive that I saw. I get it. He was getting, quite a few amount of finishes before that last fight, but against guys that really don't have the best of resumes. If you look into the guys that he was beating, not a lot of big names at all. And then he steps in there and he gets, standing guillotine choked by Du Anjong, a guy that has no resume as well either. So I'm going to go with the guy that has the resume here. I guess I'm going to take Ed Herman. The value's on Ed Herman, in my opinion. I think that I could see him pulling this fight off, and I'm pulling for him. I hope he wins the fight. In the next fight, third from final bout here, leading up to the co-main and main event slots. I kind of see why they matched these guys up right here. Danny Roberts is a guy, win or lose or draw. Matter of fact, there really ain't no draws happening. It's just win or lose. It's going to be an entertaining fight. He's either knocking you out or he's getting knocked out, or it's just an entertaining fight, whatever you want to say, man. This guy, he had the split decision victory over David Zawada. I talked about that earlier. That was a very entertaining fight. Before that, he took out Oliver Enkamp, the young prospect, the Norwegian fighter. That's a guy he's a skilled dude. We'll see him back in the UFC sometime. I'm telling you, he's very young still. But after that, he's coming off two nasty finishes, man. Claudio Silva armbarred him. Michel Pereira finished him, put him out. Wasn't a good look. And then also not too long ago, Nordine Talab finished him as well too. So Danny Roberts has some chin issues. And he's a very polished striker, but his chin really doesn't hold up, which is even more dangerous for him because he likes to use his striking, and then he gets clipped and he gets put out time and time again. Mike Perry fucking took him out a while back over there in 2016, put him out nasty finish. But he's had some nasty finishes himself, man. Bobby Nash he took out. Yeah, man. And then we'll talk about his opponent here, man. Zalim Amadayov. This is a guy, he's 8-1. This guy, he's coming off a loss against Max Griffin. For those of you guys that don't remember that fight, it was a super entertaining fight. Max Griffin was holding on for dear life. And this guy, Zalim, was just going in for the kill. This guy is, that's the type of fighter he is, man. He kind of gassed out a little bit, but this is a type of fighter. He's going in there to finish you. And you take a look at his resume, it's all finishes. And there's a reason for that. Watch the fights. Watch how this guy fights. He's not in there in the least bit to pull off a decision victory. This guy, it's either he finishes you or he's not happy. That's the case with this guy. And that's why he's getting this big slot. I'm telling you, this is a big fight here. This is going to be the most entertaining fight in the card. I'm telling you. Someone's getting finished. And I just have a feeling that Zalim's going to win this fight because Danny Roberts is the guy that has problems with his chin. Zalim doesn't show to have any problems with his chin. He could take a shot. And this is the type of fight where these guys are going to exchange. They are going to exchange. They have to. This is going to be a war. I'm taking Zalim to win this fight. He's still pretty green in his career. He's only 24 years old, and he definitely needs to polish up his striking. I think Danny Roberts will have the more polished striking in there, but I don't think that's going to matter as much as the chin's going to matter. That's why I'm taking Zalim. I'm telling you guys, if you guys are not familiar with this guy, Zaleem, watch his last fight against Max Griffin. The guy is just a beast, man. He's one of those types of fighters. He ain't there to touch gloves with you. I love watching guys like this that come around, man, once in a while. So I hope he makes a name for himself off this fight, and we continue to see him using his boxing skills inside the octagon, putting guys out. So, yeah, man. I got Zaleem Amadayov to win this fight by knockout. Here we are at the co-main event slot of the card. We got Alexander Volkov taking on Greg Hardy. If you guys, if you're over there blinking, looking closely at Greg Hardy's name, yes, that's Greg Hardy. He just fought 2 weeks ago or whatnot, 3 weeks ago. I mean, he just fought October 18th. This guy just fought 3 weeks ago. So, if that, he'll be fighting about 3 weeks from his last fight, man, against Ben Saucely. That was a fight, man. I think it really showed some red flags in Greg Hardy's game. This is a guy, time and time again, there's issues going on in his fights. You look at the Alan Crowder fight. That was a fight he threw the illegal knee. Then the Ben Saucely fight. I know he cost some of you guys some money because it got turned to a no contest immediately. And for those of you guys that are not familiar with the way that works, at least as far as some of the books that I use, that decision was made technically during the event. By the time I know that the fight technically ended and they said Greg Hardy won, but it was still, the decision was made there. This wasn't something that was overturned by a commission or whatnot, because if you get something like that where there's an overturning, if the fight's overturned by a commission, your fight's locked in, you're good if you won. If you lost, too bad for you. For example, a fight like the Brock Lesnar versus Mark Hunt fight, doesn't matter that fight was overturned months later. That fight was locked in as far as the books go. This was a fight. I had a little parlay with Greg Hardy and who else did I have in that card? It was it's not ringing a bell. I had a little play on him though. I remember the money came into my account. By the time I woke up, the money was taken back out, and it was just I got the winnings for the other fight that I had him parlayed with. Just to give you guys a little bit of a background on that. But Greg Hardy, he showed some holes in his game, man. I think his cardio, his volume. He obviously has a breathing problem, which if some of you guys aren't that familiar with, man, some of you guys think it's a joke, but when some guys have asthma, sports-induced asthma, it's a tough thing in there. So, you don't want to judge him too much. He wasn't necessarily just doing something just to dick around. Oh, I want to take an asthma spray. I mean, this guy, he definitely has a medical issue. And if you guys aren't that well read up on that, I mean, you could look into it. It's a serious deal. So, but again, the guy's had issues time and time again. And it's the second time in his short career. How reliable is he? Yeah, he's an athletic freak. He definitely carries power. I didn't like the way that Saucely was walking him down in that fight. That kind of scared me. And Saucely, he was connecting a little bit, here and there, which, Ben Saucely's a tough customer. We'll see him around the way again. Mark my words on that. But then let's talk about Alexander Volkov. Alexander Volkov, this is a guy who's coming off probably the worst loss of any UFC fighter as far as coming from, the other fighter coming from a comeback, a comeback win, getting his ass whooped and coming back and pulling the fight off. And that was in Derek Lewis. I was in Vegas for the fight. I've talked about it a little bit before. I won't shy away from it. I had $1,000 tickets in my hand with Volkov's name on it. Other people that I know had the ticket in their hand as well. We were at a table. We were absolutely shocked. Derek Lewis got that knockout with only 11 seconds left to go, and Volkov was putting a clinic on him. So there's two things you could take away from that fight. Obviously you don't like the way that Volkov looked at the last minute, the way he was backpedaling. He could have just tried to grapple, clinched, if he was a little bit more composed, and he would have won the fight. Instead, he's trying to bob and weave, getting connected on. I didn't like his composure in there. I didn't like his decision making in that fight. So that's something to take note of. But at the same time, in that fight, his striking just looked absolutely amazing. The first 2.5 rounds of that fight, I mean, you got to take note of that. This guy is a serious striker. Before that fight, he's knocking out guys like Fabricio Verdum, Stefan Struve, just putting work on some of these guys, man. Attila Vey was a tough fighter. I've been watching Volkov from the Bellator days. He's a very solid fighter, and I expect him to work Greg Hardy here. If Saucily was kind of walking Hardy down, I think Volkov's just going to be bringing it to him. He's going to be putting a pace that Hardy's not going to like. I think that he has some breathing issues, some cardio issues, and he's not going to like the pace that Volkov puts on him. If Hardy's going to win this fight, he's going to use his power and his athleticism to connect and put Volkov out in similar fashion to what Derek Lewis did. I don't want to bank on that. If I'm betting, I don't want to bank on that at all. So, I'm taking Volkov to win the fight. What you guys have to take into consideration, do you want to have a play out there that's almost a 3-1 favorite that's, should be the better fighter, is going to be, outstriking the other opponent, but he's fighting a guy that can put him unconscious at any given second, and a guy that's just, an athletic monster who you never know what type of fighter is going to step into the cage. Maybe this time his breathing's not an issue, and he starts, he's shown signs to have some really nice striking in there, Greg Hardy. He's been evolving, so you got to make that decision. But I'm taking Drago, Alexander Volkov to win that fight all day. All right, guys, we made it to the main event of the card. We got Zabit Magomed Sharipov taking on Calvin Kattar. We got a hell of a fight here. Before I even start to break down this fight, I just want to reiterate that I still do have my offer on the table for any of you guys that are eligible to sign up to Bovada.lv. You guys use my referral link that I'll send over to you. You guys will get a free month subscription to my picks. Bovada.lv is in my opinion, the best online sports book that's out. I'm sure a lot of you guys use it already. Certain countries, you're not eligible to use it. So, you just got to check that out, see if the website works for you. That's Bovada.lv. And if you guys are interested, don't sign up just through the website. Use my referral link. I'll give you a free month of my picks, and you'll also get a bonus. I believe at least of a 50% bonus. So you put $100 in, you're starting with $150. It's a great way to get introduced to the game for those of you guys that really haven't made that commitment yet to start making money betting on these fights. So that is on the table. For those of you guys that are not eligible or just looking to sign up, DM me, get at me. You guys know the deal with that, man. My exclusive picks are always available. I have packages, ranging from 1 month to a year or longer than a year. If you're interested in that, the longer the package, the better deal I'll give you. So just throwing that out there. Now let's get to this main event. A hell of a main event spot, man. Zabit, this is a guy, Abraham Lincoln. A lot of you guys know the deal with him. He's really just shown up time and time again. A lot of you guys have him as the future champion of the division. The guy's rangy. He could wrestle. He has beautiful sambo wrestling. His striking is good. He's gone in there and just destroyed all these guys, pulled off ridiculous submissions. You saw the submission of Brandon Davis. It was ridiculous, the knee bar. In his last fight against Jeremy Stephens, he didn't look the best in the late rounds of that fight. That was a little bit of a red flag on him. But, again, this is a guy that's just before that's gone in there and finished all these guys, man. Mike Santiago, Shain Moraes, Brandon Davis, early in his career, too, taking out these Russian fighters, man, early in his career. He's a true stud, this guy. He's a nasty fighter. But now, he's fighting a guy in Calvin Kattar. In my opinion, it's going to be the most talented fighter that he's ever faced. This is a step up in competition. Jeremy Stephens is a beast, but I think Kattar he's a better fighter, at this point in the game than Stephens was in that fight. Kattar is a guy that's went in there, finished guys like Ricardo Lamas, finished him in the first round in his last fight. Chris Fishgold, that was a nasty fight. He had the one setback against Hanato Moicano, but Hanato is one of the best fighters in the division as well, and that was it was a decision loss. The Shane Burgos fight, who Shain looked very good in his fight this past weekend, that was a fight that really put Kattar out on the scene. This is it really made people take note of him. Shane Burgos was really considered to be a top prospect in that fight. Kattar was people thought he had potential as well, but he was the dog going into that fight. Don't get it twisted. And he put Burgos out. He finished him in the third round, and the fight was a very entertaining fight before he finished that fight, but Calvin Kattar has nasty boxing, very, very good hands. He's well-rounded, conditioned, good frame for the weight class. He's going to cause a lot of guys problems. But, we talked about taking a step up in competition. This fight right here is, without a doubt, Calvin Kattar taking on Zabit. This is the biggest step up in competition that he's ever had. And he's quite possibly fighting, maybe the best featherweight in the world right now. That possibility is definitely out there. I'm not saying he is the best featherweight in the world right now, but he may be, and we're going to find that out soon. So, I'm going to go with Zabit in this fight. I don't think by any means this is a guarantee or a lock, anything like that. Like I said, Calvin's a very skilled fighter. He's going to use his boxing. I think, it's a 5-round fight, so in the later rounds, Calvin may start to bring it to Zabit. I just think that Zabit is so well-rounded. His striking's nasty. It's tricky. It's flashy. His sambo wrestling is very good. He can use some takedowns. It's going to look good for the scoring. On the judges' scorecards, he has the possibility to finish the fight at any time. Without a doubt, Zabit can finish anybody, even though Calvin's not a guy that typically gets finished, you know what I mean? So, matter of fact, the guy's only lost once in his career, and that was, his 4th fight as a professional back in 2008. So the guy doesn't like to be finished. So, yeah, but I got to go with Zabit to win the fight. I just think, I definitely think that Zabit has all the potential and could easily be the champion here in the next year. So I'm going to take Zabit to win this fight. I can't pick against him over there in Russia. And, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this fight takes place. And I don't think, like I said again, though, this is not a fight I think Zabit's going to run away with. I think this fight, it might play out very closely. So stay tuned. And I hope all you guys enjoy the fights. Remember, take note, the card is starting earlier than usual. Make sure you don't miss the fights. Make sure you make it a profitable event. And, on that note, I'm going to have to sign out. So, signing out, the teller.